100 years since your grandfather was buried last weekend, and then they find this. How are you feeling about that?
Well, first of all, I've always been told that there might not be anything to see because there is this amazing cine film of the ship breaking up, the masts crashing down, and people say, oh, just be a heap of spars. So I never thought there'd be so much of her. And it'd be so beautiful. The images are astoundingly beautiful. Third point is they're such wonderful condition. The portholes look as they've been cleaned.
Incredible. And apparently this has got to do with the ecosystem or the water, that there's a lack of microbes that would eat wood, for instance.
Exactly, and she was a wooden ship, of course, yes.
But as you saw from those pictures that we're showing there, it is 3,000 metres down, which is about, what, Isabella?
Well, 10,000 feet,
That's Titanic depth.
Yeah, a sperm whale would
Far too deep for humans.
Yes.
Right, so that's an interesting point. I mean, what do you want to happen to this pristine shipwreck now?
Well, perhaps I should say she belongs to me.
Yes.
She does.
Yeah.
She was insured, and the insurance company gave up their rights. And I wrote to the outfit looking, say, I've got no problem with people photographing, wonderful. No rummaging, I said.
No rummaging.
No touching.
But is there not part of you that would be curious, that would want to see it on display somewhere?
You don't raise wrecks these days. The Mary Rose would never. I mean, she wasn't anything like as deep. You just leave them there and sort of photograph them. But what riches of photography! How incredible is that? How beautiful is that? Yeah. But this is all my life, because I didn't know my grandfather, you see. He was only 47 when he died. Yes. My father was only 10. But there's so much interest in him that I must have spoken in 16 countries so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
For one reason alone, his leadership, the way he led his men. That's why 100 years later he's of so much interest.
Well, tell us about the leadership required. I often think of this, and I compare it to the Scott of the Arctic exhibit. He was in the Antarctic as well. Scott was in the Antarctic. He didn't make it back.
Scott did not know, so tragically.
So what about your grandfather? Why was he able to make it back?
Why? I think decisions he made. His first expedition's leader, Nimrod, the name of the ship, he and his men got within 97 miles of the South Pole. They would have been the first. But he knew that though they could probably get there, they would not have been in good enough health to get back. So he took a decision, it was described as one of the great decisions of polar history, to turn his back on possible glory for the sake of life. We're all defined by our priorities. His priorities were his men. And afterwards, my grandmother asked him about it, and he said, I thought you'd rather have a live donkey than a dead lion.
Very good. To tell me more about him, because I didn't know until today. Would you describe him as Irish? He was born in...
Well, he was born in Ireland, and apparently he left when he was about 10, 11, and his father was a doctor. So he came to they lived in Sydenham. And my grandfather entered the Merchant Navy at the age of 16. His first pay was £1 a month.
Wow.
And these were the days of sailing ships, 150 mast, hold on. The expression was a hand for yourself, a hand for... Of course, it was the Queen, Victoria, in those days. And you were taught knots, so what they call the rope's end. The bosun would beat the apprentices if he got to a knot wrong. Sounds very brutal, but if people were pulling the wrong ropes in a storm, the ship can sink.
Critical job.
And he loved it. He loved his life. He started off with Scott, then his own expeditions.
Did you inherit that love of the sea?
Not really, but I have been to the Antarctic 5 times, so I'm very lucky.
Did you go to the site where you're... Because obviously,
I've been to his grave in South Georgia, yes. Yeah. It is just, there's nowhere like it.
Yeah.
And the first time I went there, because he was so remote, died at 47, it sounds a cliche, but I felt closer to him because I'd seen places he would have seen.
Yes.
And I know quite a lot about remotely. For instance, the only Antarctic explorer who wrote poetry, which has to be good, doesn't it? He was a great man for words and letters, but incredibly practical. He could do any job on an expedition, however menial.
Yes.
And he expected everybody to do that. In those days, it was unusual. The officers do one thing and the men another.
Yeah. Very unusual, and men now, like myself, speaking personally, are just useless to do anything.
Can't confirm.
Well, according to my wife, I can't do anything. But he was a bit of a celebrity, wasn't he? He was a bit of a rock star, really.
Yes.
In his time, to the point where he thought he could do a Boris, basically, and be elected on his popularity as an MP.
Oh, he did, yes. He did stand very briefly with the Liberal Unionists. And as he was a popular candidate, as he said, I got all the laughs, the other candidate got all the votes. I don't think it would have suited him to be an MP because he would have liked the constraints. But
Yes.
he said once, when people said why, he said, one of his little sisters, talking about the Antarctic, you cannot think what it is like to tread where no one has trodden before. Where can you say that now?
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary what he achieved. He obviously died very young. You said he was 47 and his wife wanted for him to be buried down where he died.
So I've been to South Georgia,
Yeah, in South Georgia. But was that an unexpected death, or was that linked to the extreme conditions or the toll that he put his body
I think
through?
he'd, probably that. I think he'd had long-standing health problems. In those days, the leader could refuse to be examined. They probably couldn't now. Probably muck up your insurance. Of course, they wouldn't have insurance then. But he was happiest in his white South. The final aims of his expedition were a little bit vague, I have to say. But I think he wanted to get back to his beloved white South. And my grandmother chose him to be buried in South Georgia. He lies facing south, you know, the graveyard.
Lovely. And you are adamant you either can't or won't raise the Endurance.
She won't be raised.
She won't be raised. Do you have any memorabilia of your grandfather, or is there a museum dedicated to him or anything like that?
Most of the memorabilia are in the Scott Polar Research Institute in Cambridge or the Royal Geographical Society, which, by the way, has just opened a magnificent Shackleton exhibition. I heartily recommend it.